Hello fellow modelers, Bruce here. In this video I want to talk about making wood tanks, either water tanks or oil tanks, or for that matter tanks to hold any liquid but made out of wood, and a couple different techniques to do that, and a little math lesson along the way. Normally when you have a kit that wants you to build a water or oil tank, or if you're scratch building one, you want to start with a core that is stable. So it's fine to start with a cardboard tube, but have one that when you do a gentle pressure doesn't collapse into an oval. So something like a toilet paper tube or a paper towel tube, generally a little bit too flexible. So you want something with a little bit thicker wall. These two tank cores come from this kit from K&L House of Wood, and it's Woody's well number 1, which is an oil well, and here you can see the two tanks. So yep, that's because it comes in a kit, and their suggestion is one of the two ways to do this, which is to take strip wood of either 1 or 2 inch thickness, scale thickness, so 2 bys or 1 bys, and glue them vertically around the tube. Now if the diameter of the tube is large enough, 2 bys work well, and Woody's well suggests that you use for theirs 2x10s, and I'll see how that looks. If it looks, the problem as you go around with thicker wood is sometimes you see the joints open up a little bit. So I think 2x10s will be okay, and I'll show you that process in a little while. If the tube has a much smaller diameter, like this tube, which did not come from a kit, but is very stable, is a much smaller diameter. 2 bys might be too thick, and I might cover that with 1x8s or 1x6s, we'll see. Also, this, which by the way, last time I went for my 6-month checkup and needed a blood test, the nurse, when she's done, puts a piece of gauze over the site and then wraps this adhesive that sticks to itself around it, and she emptied out the tube, and I asked her if I could have it. Now that's a little bit too tall for its diameter, so I'll be cutting that one, I would imagine. But whenever I find one, I keep it. And this one is also a nice thick core, and that comes from some Scotch packing tape. And again, I save anything I find. The other way that you can find in kits in particular, this is a fine scale miniatures. That was George Celios's first kit, his branch line water tower, and that was a wood tower. And he did, again, give you a cardboard tube to start with, but instead of gluing individual sticks around it, he gave you scribe siding that was extremely thin and scribed pretty well through, so you can curve it right around the kit. I don't want to do it too far because I want to do it when I have glue on it. So that's the other approach, and I've seen that not only on this kit from George, but I would say maybe 10 years ago, a company called Rusty Stumps put out a backwoods water tank that had a similar approach to it. So yeah, I save these because I'm often scratch building water tanks. So, all right, now for the math lesson. When I get a piece like this, and I'm kind of saying, okay, is that realistic for a water tank, or is it too small? I want to know how many gallons of water would that hold, and so there comes the math lesson. First of all, these are all cylinders, right? Circular base and a height, and the volume of a cylinder from your high school geometry is the area of the base times the height, okay? And since the base is a circle, its area is pi times the radius squared, and then times the height, h, or to approximate 3.14, which is a 2 decimal approximation of pi, times the radius squared times the height. And that, if you are doing your measurements in scale feet, will give you cubic feet. So now you know how many cubic feet the tank is, and to convert cubic feet to gallons, which is what you normally think of when you want to measure what a tank will hold. You want to know how many gallons it holds. You multiply your cubic feet times 7.481. So again, you can take a screenshot of that if you want, or I'm a retired math teacher among other things, but so I remember this stuff. But if it's been a long time since your high school geometry, you might want to just take a screenshot of that. But now, if you wanted to know, what the capacity of these two oil tanks that I'll be building for Woody's well. This one has an 11-foot diameter, so the radius is 5.5. It is 16 feet tall, and so when you do the pi r squared h, you get 1,520 cubic feet. And when you multiply by the 7.481, you find out it's an 11,371 gallon capacity. The shorter one that was provided is also 11 feet in diameter, but only 13 feet tall, and that ends up with a 9,238 gallon capacity. So there's the math lesson, and when I come back to the video, I will show you how I go about gluing the wood strips in a nice way around those cores. Talk to you then. All right, time to continue this video on making wooden water tanks. Forgot to show you this. This is the bonanza of all of my water tank cores. It's extremely thick, and it's 4.5 feet long. So I have enough core material here for probably every water tank I could ever build in what remains of my lifetime. But my wife Bonnie had ordered an area rug that came shipped to us, and it was wrapped around this core, and I grabbed it as soon as I saw it. So always keep your eye open for these things. Alrighty, first step on getting these tanks covered with wood strips. You want them all to be nice and vertical. So take a square, and you're going to sit the tank right on the square like that, and then you are going to get yourself a pencil and just run it straight up the square, and now you have your starting line, and you'll glue your first strip onto that, and when it's well and dry you can start working. And I typically work in both directions, and it's a good chance when you get down to the end, if you're using, let's say, 2x10s the way the K&L House of Wood wanted you to do on Woody's well, you might not be able to fit a 10-foot board in there. So I always have some 8-foot boards, 6-foot boards, 4-foot boards also stained up, and one of those will probably work quite well. And if not, you just have to take your 10-foot board and narrow it down by slicing it. But I tend to go in both directions out from that first board. So you draw yourself your line. The second thing I do is I'm going to want on these, according to the picture from the kit, flat tops, no peak top, flat tops. And so I'm going to be gluing boards across the top to form the top of the tank. And because I don't want to have to just glue them on each edge, I usually put a base under them. And that could either be cardstock or balsa wood works well. And glue that on first. So I'm going to take my tank and take my pencil again and draw right around the tank, and Now I'll cut that out and use a pair of curved scissors, like fingernail scissors or whatever. You can do a pretty good job. And if it's a little bit out of round, you can file cardstock. So I'm going to get that. I'm going to glue that on top, and then I'll come back and show you the beginning of the gluing of the wood. Talk to you then. Okay, quick update on preparing the slats for the outside of the water tank. You can see I have glued in place the, I'll call them the lids of each of these tanks. I don't worry about the bottom, that's going to be glued down. And so those are now ready. I measured the height again to make sure, and this one was indeed 13 foot tall. To double check, I took out of my spam can, and if you don't know what's in the spam can, that means you missed a key video of mine. Shame on you. But anyway, it contains lengths of strip wood that I've had over the years to various lengths. This is a 13-footer, and holding it up to the side of the tank, it's indeed the right one. Put that into my chopper, set the block, and start chopping. Now, they provided rather long strips of the 2x10s, and first thing I did was take a razor saw with a fine teeth and scraped it along each of those long lengths to put in some wood grain. Then I ran those through a piece of folded over wet dry paper. I used to call it emery cloth. And now I had to figure out how many of those to cut. Go back to your geometry. You have 10-inch boards. You're going to be putting them side to side all the way around. So that gives you, they have to cover the circumference of the circle. The circumference of the circle is pi times the diameter, which is 3.14 times 11 feet, but I want it in inches because I have a 10-inch board. So that's 132 inches, and when you multiply it, you get 414.5 inches is the circumference. So how many 10-inch boards go in there? Divide 10 into that, 41.5. I think I got 42 there. Hopefully that'll be enough. So I'm going to stain these now in my alcohol and India ink, and when that's done, I will get them out and start the gluing, and I will see you again then. Alrighty, let's see where we are right now on building these wooden tanks. The shorter of the two is complete. All the wood is glued along the sides and on the top. Bottom, as I've said before, can remain open because I'm going to be gluing that down. So, and while I was doing that, I started working on gluing the slats onto the taller of the two, so I'm going to continue working on that. What remains on this tank is to put the bands around the tank that would hold the slats in place. And in the plans for this kit, you can see in this picture they're showing 1, 2, 3, 4 bands, and those bands are probably, first of all, they're too evenly spread. On all these tanks, the bands as you went down got closer together because of the pressure is greater at the bottom of the tank. And I would probably use at least 5 on this tank instead of the 4 that they have. They suggested using this fine wire. You can see here that they included in the kit. I am not going to use that. Instead, I'm going to use my old go-to on doing bands around wooden tanks, which you can see on this tank. Okay, and here you can see that there are going around 5 bands getting closer together on the bottom. And what I use on these is something that my wife suggested back when I did my first wooden tank, and that is to use elastic sewing thread or sometimes you find it in Hobby Lobby or Michael's in the jewelry section, where they might call it elastic bead cord. And if you remember how thin that wire was before, you'll see that this is in the neighborhood of it. Looks pretty darn good in HO, and I think would be fine in N. And I think that you can find elastic thread in different thicknesses. So if you're modeling an S or O, you might want to have one of the greater thicknesses. This is white, and I'm not going to use it. I've used up all my black, and I'm ordering some more. But I start with black thread, and then to make it look rusted instead of brand new, I take a cloth or a paper towel and get some rust color paint on it, and then draw this elastic cord through that, making it get rusty, and then let that dry. Then what you do is cut off a length that is a little bit bigger than the circumference of your tank, and tie a knot in it, making a loop, but you want to make the loop just a little bit smaller than what the circumference here is, so that it's under some tension, and that will help you keep these in place, because now they have some, they snap back with the elasticity, and you can get them all nice and even. Then I put a little puddle of liquid super glue on a piece of wax paper, and come back with, I'm going to use just a pointer here right now, but I use a needle, dip it in, get some super glue on, and then come back and just touch it on the cloth and let it soak through. Move over, ½ inch, put another dab, and that will hold those in place. So you use the stability of an elastic that has snapped back and held to get everything even, and then you hold them in place with it going all around the bands with a dab of super glue. And as I said, that'll hold them in place. And in many cases, you can leave the knot in place because, if, for instance, this kit here is going to be against a backdrop, and this water tank, the only thing you're going to see is the front. So if the knots are in the back, it doesn't matter. But if you don't do that, here's my suggestion. The knots here are behind this board, but I would come in with my glue up to, fairly close to the knot, but you don't want to let the glue go into the knot. And the same thing from the opposite side. Once that dries, I would untie the knot, and then you want to glue the opposite ends, overlapping a little bit, and I'll use these toothpicks to show you what I mean. You let them overlap a little bit like this, and glue them in place, and everything should be fine. But that elastic thread works extremely well for the bands on a water tank. And I'm going to do that on here, and again, as I said, I will probably put 5 bands on it. And then I'll do what the plans call for in terms of any ladders and piping and so forth. You see in this picture, they have a ladder going up, actually each tank, and on the top of the tank they have a walkway, and they actually have a walkway going between the 2 tanks. So yeah, that's because that's the specifics of this model. But in terms of just building a water tank, you're almost there now, and all you have to do is put the bands on, and then you can, depending on your use, put a spout on it, put pipes going into it, etc. All right, I think that'll be it for this video, just to talk a little bit about making these wooden water tanks. They're easy, kind of scratch build, and all you need is a decent core and you're off to the races. All right, as usual, if you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you've not already done so, please subscribe to my channel, and I'll be talking to you again soon.